Okay. Welcome everybody to a spur of the moment project that came up on the stream. Somebody asked me what I'm most disappointed about in the game, and I just went on a rant and I thought, hey, I think there's quick fixes for this. One of the biggest gripes that the developers have with the community, and I know because I've talked to them, is that people just blindly tell them, yo, fix the game, fix the game. What does it mean to fix the game? There's a lot of small, big issues, and I think overall the developers are doing a good job. The direction they're going in is almost always good, with some setbacks. But what I cannot stand and what kills me and what breaks my heart is the priorities. Very minor things get fixed that could have just been the way they were for a long time. And then other glaring issues just get ignored or get postponed or come too little too late. So in this stream, I proposed some of my ideas, and together we've been talking about, some of you guys suggested some amazing things, to fix the game. Let's go over them. We discussed, went back and forth a bunch, and this was the result. Let me zoom in a little bit and I'll go one by one. I think the biggest issue with the game right now, honestly, is the nuclear options. And what I mean by nuclear options is the things that both sides have, that if they bring them, they make the game really unfun for the other side. And the only reason they are generally not brought is because they fear that the other side will do the same. Let's start with killers. I think the strongest thing killers have that I think is really unfun to play against and has been left unchecked for a long time is moris. Particularly the pink, but also the green mori. With a mori, you cut the chases necessary in a game by more than half, pretty much. You just chase a survivor once, put them on the hook. If that survivor goes down ever again, and you can camp and make sure that he will go down, he's out of the game. It's keeping a lot of stages, giving survivors very little to do. You play survivor, you see a mori, you already know how the game's going to go most of the time. Not very fun. My simple, elegant solution: moris, the yellow one, the cypress mori, works the exact same way it does. That one's fine. The green and the pink one need to, for them to be used, you need to have hooked all of the survivors at least once. So it would be like barbecue and chili. Once you have 4 stacks, the moris activate. This means that if you hook Jake, Dwight, Claudette, and Meg, then you can mori Jake or Dwight, but not before. This makes it so the survivors can actually hide and keep one survivor hidden and keep one survivor away, and the moris would still be powerful. If you have an intense match where you're hooking everybody, as it should be, you will still get to use them and they will still be powerful, but it won't be this scenario where before you're even chased, one guy is out of the game at 5 gems. So I think that's an elegant solution because it also doesn't compromise archive challenges or achievements because you can still use all the moris. I also think that some add-ons are a little bit too powerful and also in the downright not fun area. I suggested some changes for some of them. I think the craziest add-on right now for killer is iridescent head on Huntress. This one right here. And my solution that has been suggested by other people, actually it's not really mine, is to make it only trigger after a certain distance. That means that if you hit a survivor from, let's say, 16, 20, 24 meters, you insta-down them. But if you don't do that, then this add-on doesn't do anything. It would be an add-on that would encourage good hunters to land cool shots and would encourage survivors to look for cover at a distance, and I think that would be okay, personally. Maybe make it a bit longer if you fear that a hunter is just gonna haul her hatchet from a distance, but that would be way better than what it does now. And that would be a simple fix. Pinker Finger on Clown could remove some of the bottles. The Tombstone Fragment on Myers could remove tier 3 forever after it's used once. The Scalp Top Knot on Oni could be a little bit less powerful, but you could also buff the base charging of the Demon Dash. The Exhaustion add-ons on Huntress and Clown are really outdated. Instead of being 30 and 90 seconds, they should probably be 5 and 8 seconds. Something more in line to how exhaustion works. And I personally also think the modded Daughter Ring is really nutty. And maybe the spirit should be partially visible. There's a few other add-ons that are on this problematic area, but for the most part, that would be it. Now on the survivor side, what are things that survivors can bring that are really not fun? Map offerings. I think map offerings suck the fun out of the game a lot. When the killer uses it, I think it's really, really strong. It could be looked at, but when survivors use it, especially when they're not survivor friends, I think it's too much. You have too much control. over all the survivors, over all of your perks, all your items, and also the map you're going to. I think that's ridiculous. I think that if you're playing in a survivor friends, map offerings should just not work. You can make it so that you can only use map offerings when you're playing solo, or maybe when you're playing duo. And if you're playing 3 or 4, you could, it could be either way. You cannot use map offerings. This would avoid the nasty situations where you go against 4 survivors who send you to the map of their choice, and they just toy with you. You know that if they send you to a map, at least you have some solos in your lobby. Yeah, you could get the offering back, of course. It could just be cancelled. Object of Obsession, I think, is one of the nastiest perks in the game. We'll talk about it a bit later. I think it should be reworked. It's a perk that doesn't promote fun gameplay. I think originally it was conceived as I'm fragile and exposed, but I have information on the killer, risk reward. You see the killer sees you, and it's a bit of no, it doesn't work like that at all. The reason people use Object of Obsession is to call out the killer to their teammates, or just to see where the killer is so that they can, get the attention to themselves and be chased. I think this doesn't really counter all the killers, but the killers that it does counter, it's not really fun to, set down a trap and have it called out by a survivor to their teammates. It should be reworked. My personal idea, Object of Obsession should be a perk that encourages the killer not to tunnel you. If you're being chased, the perk lights up and all of your teammates can see your aura, and they also get a little icon knowing that it's this perk working. And maybe you can also give them a bit of a speed boost, like 1 or 2% healing or gen or whatever it might be. Something, if you are the obsession. Something minor that gives info that rewards you with information to your teammates if you're good at running the killer for a long time. It could be that, it could be anything else, just not the way it works. The next thing that I think survivors can bring to make it really not fun is stacking meta perks, which, we'll get to into later because it's a big complex problem, and bring in really strong items. The way I think this could be fixed in a reasonable way, the way that killers work right now, if they choose Trapper, they cannot back out. They are locked into that Trapper because of the MMR system that's going to happen soon. I think items should be the same for the Survivor. A Survivor should choose an item with 15 seconds remaining. After the 15-second timer happens, if everybody's already ready, obviously it goes off. But after that 15-second, survivors cannot switch items. This would avoid the nasty situations where you see 4 default blights and they all switch last second to Claudette with, with 4 keys or outrageous things like that. It would also really, really help if each item had the rarity of the item expressed in its skin. So if I see 4 brown toolboxes, I'm not going to be, okay, I need to bring a mori, I need to do something about this. And if I see 4 purple toolboxes or 4 purple medkits, then I know what I'm headed towards. I think that would help a little bit as well. If you want to bring an item, the downside is that the killer knows about it. And this would help buff some of the perks that let you get items, like Plunderers, Pharmacy, Inner Strength to heal yourself without an item, self-care even. This would help you do the things that items do without having to warn the killer about them. What? I think it would give these perks a bit more utility. Thank you, Charlie Wade, by the way, for the sub. So I think that would help a bit with that. As for keys, I don't know how feasible this is because there's achievements and archives that have to do with keys. I think it would be wonderful if keys had a 1-second animation, just like moris have to buffer and take in a while. Keys could take a little second to activate and maybe close after one person uses the key. It's really silly how powerful one key is and how one key can get 3 or 4 people to escape. Thank you, Gunner Girl, by the way. I appreciate the 3 months. I might mute notifications for a little bit while I go over this real quick because I don't want it to take forever. Yeah, this is map buffering, guys. So with this, if you did these changes, which I think are simple and reasonable for the most part, I think that would increase the healthy environment that we want to create in this game. You don't want to go into a lobby knowing that if the survivors bring certain things, you will have 0 chance. And if the killer doesn't want you to have fun, you're just not going to have fun with nothing you can do. No player, killer or survivor should go into a lobby and load up into the match and see the offerings and be like, all right, this is hopeless. I feel like that's a really bad thing. This is why we have people killing themselves. This is why we have people disconnecting. Everybody should go into a match thinking that they have a chance. I think that is the biggest deal with the game. The second biggest deal, in my opinion, is that there's huge discrepancies in balance. Some maps are very killer-sided, very favorable, or very balanced, and then some maps are super horrible. And this discrepancy where you load into a map and you're like, okay, or you're like, God help me, I think is bad for the game. We talked about maps very briefly. There's a lot of them that need a lot of work for sure. Almost all of us agree that Ormond is too big. It could be a bit smaller. That huge building being in the center of a huge map is a bit troublesome. I think that it should be more to a side, more like the Rancid is right now, where the building is close to a side and there's no huge map all over around it. There's also an abundance of really safe tiles where every pallet can be dropped and not really played around as a killer. If this was changed, I think Ormond would be a bit more pleasant. Haddonfield, we've agreed that the fences are a problem. Sometimes they're reasonable, sometimes they're so long that they really make the large map even larger. Buildings are a problem as well. The map, as we said, is very large. Then you get to a building and it's almost artificially extending the size of the map because you need to take a long time to get there and then a long time to go up the stairs to kick the gen and so on. It would be great if the map was maybe shrinked a bit. And there's also many buildings that are empty. They're huge buildings taking up a lot of space that you cannot go through. All you do, in fact, for the most part as a normal killer is to go around it and chase around them. And this is a lot of dead space that just contributes to just you running around buildings. I think these buildings could maybe be removed to a degree. There should be I think there's 2 or 3 of them in Haddonfield at any given time. They could be looked at to make the map a bit more fun. In my opinion, at least. We've also talked about the game, and this is shared with many indoor maps. It's hard to know your way around it. More accessibility would be nice. Stairs being accessible for more angles and visible for more angles would be great. There's barely any windows. There's a few, but they get very little use. And the safe pallets are also a problem. It would be nicer if we had more variety in pallets. We've also talked about how Shelter Woods has no verticality. There's no hills. Very little chance to use balance landing and other perks like that. It would be nice if it had some walls to block lines of sight so the map is not so open, and maybe some hills or some kind of verticality built into it. We also mentioned how Azerobs has a very narrow middle where it makes it really unfun. If the killer secures a hook and a down, then he can just stay in the middle, and survivors really can't do much in some, for the most part. It would be a bit nicer if that middle was a bit wider, like in Suffocation Pit, or if there was more walls or rubble so that survivors had more chances to slip by undetected and the killer had a bit more trouble actually seeing the entire choke point of the map. And maps honestly are very difficult, and there's a million things we could say about them, but yeah, we're not gonna single out every single map. Those are some from the top of our head. Another thing that we think is a problem, or that I think at least is a problem, is perks. I think almost everybody can agree, especially after we see the statistics. We had a brief look at a post on Reddit. A man that played 100 games of Killer, he saw Dead Heart in 87% of them. Decisive in 86% of them. Borrow Time in 85% of them. The next one was Primrose. Or, you have the same 5 to 6 perks that are so good that overshadow literally every other perk that it's really sad to see it. I think that the developers have, we said that there's 70 plus perks on both sides, and you really don't see that many of them, which is a shame. The developers have a good idea of what to do. I think they're starting to rebalance old perks, buff perks that were a bit of a miss, and that's great. That's great. Perks that I think personally need rebalancing right now. Object of Obsession, not for being too strong, but for being anti-fun. These perks for being too game-changing. Decisive Strike, just like Pop Goes the Weasel had a really long timer that lets you get 3 downs and still kick a gen, Decisive Strike is absolutely too lenient. It's outrageous that a survivor can be unhooked, fully heal, do half a gen, hide, get found, get hit once, get hit twice, get picked up, and still use DS. There's many ways it could be reworked. You could make the timer only work if you're being chased. You could make it so that it doesn't work from lockers, because it's really silly when survivors just go into a locker. Or it could just go away if you get healed, or if you do gens, or if you do objectives. There's a million ways to fix it, but I think we agree. It should help combat tunneling, but that's it. It shouldn't just give you 60 seconds of full protection. I also believe that Noid is not a healthy perk. It does not, just like totems are random, it's very hard for survivors to just do bones. I know the developers have expressed in the past that just do bones. It's not so easy. If you play solo queue, and even if you have maps, it's very easy to do 4 totems and then lose the 5th one. And that's where Noid goes. And the really bad thing about it is that it rewards you no matter what you do throughout the trial. No one escapes death implies almost that, you know, you were close to death, but now you're escaping it. No, now you're back. I think it should reward you for doing something through the trial, rather than encourage you just to camp that guy in the basement and then get 2 kills with Noid. Some ideas that would work. It could give you 1 insta-down per each totem remaining in the map. That would encourage you not to run it with other hex perks, which are strong, which would be nice. Or, this is my idea, how I think it would work. It could give you 1 insta-down per each unique survivor hook. Just like barbecue, if you have 4 stacks, you've hooked all 4, you get 4 insta-downs, and then the perk disappears, like Hunt the Ground, it goes away. And it could also give you a movement speed boost based on the tier, or it could have a cap. Oh, only 2 insta-downs, up to 3 insta-downs, up to 4 insta-downs. This makes it so that survivors, if they have a guy on the hook with Noid, they can go there, get down, use Unbreakable, get down again. Now he only has 1 insta-down left. They have different ways to play around Noid. And it also makes it so that if you just sit AFK in front of a hook survivor since generator number 5, you don't have a powerful Noid. You only have 1 insta-down with it. So it rewards you for playing around it. I think Adrenaline is a fine perk. High risk, high reward. Risk, of course, is that you die and you don't get to use it. I think it's a bit strange that it heals you off a hook, considering that there's other unhooking perks. That's what I would change about it, but it's not a huge deal. And Undying, I think, has shifted the meta for killer in an unpleasant way. Now Ruin Undying is meta. And I think this perk, for a single perk, does way too much. It shows you aura around people, around totems, any totem, throughout the map, with no cooldown, no distance, anything at all, which means that sometimes you're chasing a survivor and you get wall hacks because they walk by a bone, and sometimes at the start you spot 3 survivors immediately. It does that, it resets your totems that are gone, and it doesn't have a limit. So if you run Undying and Ruin, which is the most popular killer combo right now, pretty much, for a slowdown, they could do Ruin. This is Undying and this is Ruin. They could do Ruin and it would reappear. They could do Ruin again, it would reappear. They could do Ruin again and then it would reappear. They would need to do Ruin 4 times in the worst case scenario. Which means that survivors have to look for 2 lit totems, do them at the same time, and then look for the 3rd if they're lucky to find it. If you play with map, with the Detective's Hunch, and you play as a team and you have comms, this is doable. Otherwise, it's, I think, unbearable. A good way to fix it, in my opinion, maybe the aura should only be visible while survivors cleanse totems. That would make this perk good, but not amazing out of reading for no reason. That's an idea. But perhaps the most important one, make it so that when the perk itself, Undying, gets cleansed, any perk that has already been reset and respawned also gets cleansed with it. So if you do Ruin and it respawns and then you do Undying, then the respawn Ruin will go with it. That way you cleanse 2 totems to get rid of 2 perks, rather than cleanse 5 totems or 4 totems to get rid of 2 perks. That, I think, would make this perk still really strong, but not RNG unreasonable strong. But right now, it's, I think, a little bit so good that it just overshadows other perks, the same way Diaz Unbreakable and other perks overshadow other survivor perks. So those are some of our ideas to fix perks and help with the balance. There are many, many, many bad perks that need a huge buff, and some of the decent ones that could use still a bit of a buff. But that was our idea. The second problem, forgive me, the third problem is the wild imbalance between killers. Sometimes, even though you're playing the same video game, playing a certain killer feels like hard mode, playing another killer feels like easy mode. And it's got to do with add-ons, it's got to do with base kit, it's got to do with cooldown, abilities, like a million things. We tried to get together and agree which killers are mostly okay. They could use some tweaks, maybe they're already perfect in terms of balance. We agree that Plague, Blight, Billy, Doctor, Slinger, even though he's got some issues, Hunters, Nurse, Executioner, Baba, Ghosty, Oni, Legion, Demo, are for the most part okay. Few changes to add-ons, few changes to base kit, they would be mostly okay. But we think that other killers need some nerfs, and some of them need buffs as well. On the nerf side, Freddy getting no BT because of his Oblivious effect is I don't think it was ever intended. It was more like a side effect that makes him really unfair. Freddy had massive slowdown. He could put down snares and not lose bloodlust. He had the add-ons that slow you down a lot. He was super unbearable. When he hit you with BT, you lost it as you run. Those things have changed, which is great. Now his add-ons are way weaker. He doesn't get to be a Forever Freddy anymore. He doesn't get to hit a survivor with borrowed time and have that guy bleed out in 10 seconds, which is good. However, one thing that changes is that now he ignores BT when people are asleep. And if you're camping someone on the hook and you hit the rescuer, that person immediately goes into obliviousness because he's asleep now. So a camping Freddy completely denies BT, which I think is not healthy for the game, and it's very unique to him. No other killer can really, hit you and keep his terror radius for the most part, right? Without perks being really well timed. So borrowed time could work on the hook survivor rather than the unhooker. If the hook survivor is within the terror radius, borrowed time activates and not the other way around. That would immediately, because survivors on the hook are always awake, that would immediately fix this issue. Or they could also make it so that if a survivor is hit, their obliviousness happens after 3 seconds, so that they actually have a chance to use a BT. If you consider that this is too big of a nerf, there could also be some buffs that you could add to compensate. You could remove the noise that he does when he teleports to make his mind games a bit easier. And you could maybe even give him a quality of life aura. When he readies up a teleport, he could see a little aura of himself pointing in the direction that he's going to look when he completes the teleport. That would help especially new Freddys and old Freddys, because there's no way of knowing, to know where to look the moment that they complete the teleport. Those are some nice changes to make up for it. About Spirit, we've agreed that she's still very strong and very hard to play against. Very little counterplay from the survivors for the most part, especially now that she's bugged and her steps are almost inaudible. A Spirit stands still and it's pretty much down to luck. Yes, you can make good guesses. Yes, in the middle of a chase you can do things, but it's ultimately up to the Spirit to fall for your mind games. And at the same time, she could just be standing still and you could be making a fool of yourself. I think a really good change is the one we've come up with, which is to have glimpses. We explained that the Spirit takes 1.45 seconds to activate her ability. She goes 145, a bit less with add-ons. Then she can phase for 5 seconds, and it takes her, 3 times as much to recover from that. The problem is that during those 5 seconds, you know nothing, basically. The Spirit doesn't even move grass when she moves around. Honestly, I think she could. That's why we said move foliage. It would be nice if the Spirit moving through grass also reveal herself, the same way survivors stepping through grass let themselves be known to the Spirit that's looking. So one nice thing that could happen is that during those 5 seconds or more, if it decides to get buffed, the Spirit could have glimpses of her current location shown to the survivor. If you played old Freddy, it would be very similar to when Freddy was putting you asleep. You would see the Spirit in the standing still position, and then she would reappear here. And she would take this path right here. But for the survivor, what he would see is that he would see the Spirit standing still, and then a couple seconds later, he would see a glimpse of the Spirit, and then he'd be like, oh, he's on that side. Oh, which side? Should I drop the pallet? Should I keep running? And then they would see another glimpse, and then maybe another, depending on how long the glimpses appear. The Spirit herself would have a little flash on her screen every time there's a glimpse. BT's borrowed time, Stefan. The Spirit herself will have a little blink, a little visual cue on her screen every time there's a glimpse. So she could do the charge, start facing, show up from one side, show the glimpse, and then immediately change around, just like old Freddy could, and then come up from the other direction. So there would be a fun back and forth where the survivor would see the Spirit stand still. If the Spirit stands still for 10 seconds, then he would know, because he's seeing no glimpses, that the Spirit is just baiting it. But for those few seconds, he would be looking back and wondering. And then they would see this glimpse, and they wouldn't know, oh, where's the next glimpse going to be? Is he going to be here? Is she going to come from this side? It would involve a bit of guessing and a bit of prediction, but it would give you some in-between points so that you as a survivor have something to do. And the spirit herself would also have something to show and to play around. So these glimpses could happen every 2 seconds, every 2.5 seconds. It doesn't really matter. Like, the actual mechanic could be fine-tuned, I'm sure, but that is the general idea. This makes her more interesting to play as and more interesting to play against, in my opinion. And then we talked about Hag. Hag is a really strong killer. She's not played a lot, but we agree that she's pretty strong. A really nice change that would help her be a bit more fun to play against would be the one that Mickey suggested, and it's very simple. When the Hag is a very defensive killer, right? So the issue is that when she gets to a hook, let's make a quick one right here. When she gets a trap near a hook, which can be really close to a hook survivor, let's assume that there's one right here. A survivor that goes for the rescue has to mind the 3-meter radius, this is 3 meters, both when they go for the rescue and when they do the rescue and when they run out of there. So they would need to crouch all the way and then crouch all the way back, and that goes for both survivors. This gives the Hag a lot of time to do whatever, and it makes saving from the hook very, very difficult against a defensive killer. An idea from Mickey is that if the Hag has a million traps, it doesn't matter. Once you, this is the center of the hook, once you get an unhook for an 8-meter radius, this could change. All the traps around the hook get automatically snapped, as if they were disabled by a flashlight. That means that if the survivor makes a blunder when going for the unhook, the Hag can teleport and immediately hit there. But what the Hag can no longer do is just wait for the unhook, then start coming back, and since there's a million traps, survivors have no chance to ever escape. So that would be a nice little, very small change to make the Hag more about defending the map and controlling the map, rather than defending the person on the hook forever and making unhooking impossible. And a very, very small change for a killer that could honestly afford it. Then we also talked about the killers that would need a bit of help. This is quite debatable, but we went with Wraith, Pig, Myers, Trapper, and Clown. And yeah, we agreed that Wraith without add-ons is really, really slow. It makes a huge difference having add-ons to his movement speed when he's cloaked. It would be a bit nice if he had something similar to Yellow Windstorm speed by default. And then the Windstorm add-ons could be buffed and reworked so that they give a similar buff to get the previous results, but, you know, so that the base would be the current Yellow. We also think that it's unreasonable that Wraith is visible in his cloak form from that far away. It really ruins his stealth and especially his early game approach and his early game surprise if he gets spotted from across the map in a map like Blood Lodge, where it's super open. If he remains invisible while he's cloaked from 24 meters or further, or something around that line, I think that would help him. It wouldn't let him camp and patrol the hook a lot, but it would let him get around the map without being spotted from really, really far. Also, worth mentioning, the Wraith can stand still and be completely invisible, which means that he can sometimes face camp and body block doorways and do nasty things. It would be nice if he became slightly visible after 10 seconds or 5 seconds or whatever to avoid this kind of probably unintended exploit. We also think that his light burn, when he's flashed at for a few seconds, he gets burned and stunned for a very long time, which is really hard to avoid in some instances. The penalty seems a little bit harsh. He should get put out of his power, and he should maybe be slowed down. But we agreed. The consensus was that maybe it should be a bit shorter. The stun that happens when you are cloaked by a pallet is also significantly longer. Almost, I think more than twice as long as a normal pallet stun. It would be nice if it was a bit shorter. It can be a bit longer than a normal stun, we agreed, but maybe not the whole 5 or 4.5 seconds that it is. It would also be really nice if the Shadow Dance add-ons work for about 5 seconds after uncloaking. That would mean that you can uncloak And if a survivor immediately drops a pallet, you could use that shadow dance for a few seconds to break it really, really fast and get use out of the add-ons. Right now, those add-ons don't really do much because when you're cloaked, you're not in chase, and when you're in chase, the windows don't get blocked, and survivors have no reason to drop pallets or to, or do anything other than just stall the game. So it would be a nice way to make those add-ons more fun without actually touching the add-on themselves. And I think that's all for Wraith. For Pig, we talked about different solutions. We talked about how it could be that survivors have to constantly search 2 boxes to get it out. The one we like the best is the fixed RNG solution. Right now, the way the Pig works is that each trap, each reverse bear trap, has a random key that's randomly placed in one of the 4, this is by default, I don't change it up, one of the 4 jigsaw boxes. So you have scenarios where survivors take 1 attempt, 1 attempt, 1 attempt, and maybe 2 attempts. And this is really hard on the Pig, that match, that the Pig gets very little use out of her power. But then on the opposite side, you've got matches where it takes 3 attempts, when it takes 4 attempts, when the guy just straight up dies because he doesn't even get to the 4th, and also 2 attempts when the 4th guy is already dead. And that is really game changing. On average, yeah, the Pig might be doing well, but these extreme cases don't really help her. It's not really within your power to have good luck or bad luck. So with a fixed RNG system, it would still be random. You would have one of the traps be removed on the first search, one of the traps be removed on the second, one of them on the third, and the other one on the 4th. So the first survivor that you find might get the second one. The second survivor that you find might get the 4. The third might get the 3rd, or maybe he'll get the first, and then the final one will be the 3rd. And this guarantees that every match you have more of an idea of what to expect. It doesn't really, I think it would be very hard for a Pig to keep track of everything and know for a fact that, this box, like it would be hard for the Pig to manipulate this. It wouldn't really change the result on average. It would just make it so that each match is not completely black, completely white. It would be more of a gray one. So that's for RNG and her power. Unfortunately, her chasing is also a bit, her chasing power and her stealth are a bit lacking. Compared to Wraith, to Ghostface, and to all the other stealth killers, she really is lacking. She's slow, very slow when she crouches. She's slow crouching and uncrouching. Add-ons help a bit. And we feel like an overall speed up of her abilities would be a really good idea. She should crouch a little bit faster by default. She should move a little bit faster. Maybe she could charge a bit faster. She just feels like she's a bit slow, is all. And an overall speed up of everything would help, in my opinion. Now, another thing that would help as well, it's more minor but would also be nice, would be to improve her noises. Right now she does 2 noises that give her away that we think is maybe a bit unnecessary. The first one is the blade. If you're doing a generator and you suddenly hear a shilling, then you know that the Pig is uncrouching behind the corner. Gives you a chance to sprint burst away. This also happens in L2 walls and other another scenarios during chase. It would be really nice if a Pig could go behind a wall during a chase and you're like, oh, what is she? And she was charging up a roar. Unfortunately, this would never happen because you can hear the blade retract as she steps down out of sight, which is a bit unnecessary. And again, the roar happens very early. So if the blade noise could be removed or reduced and the roar could be maybe slightly delayed instead of happening so early, perhaps that would help her in chase a little bit and would give her a chance to compete with the other stronger killers. Myers has been almost untouched for a long time. I think it's easy to agree that his tier 1 is a hindrance, an impediment for him to start pressuring survivors rather than a tool. Back when survivors were scaredy cats and they were afraid of stealth killers and you could grab them because there wasn't dedicated servers, maybe tier 1 was a bit more useful. Now that doesn't happen anymore. He's no longer invulnerable to Spine Chill. Like, his tier 1 is too much of a hindrance. So what we think is that his tier 1 should be faster somehow. We came up with some ideas. Some people suggested that his tier 1 shouldn't mind distance. It'll be like Ghostface. If he stalks you for 5 seconds, which is the average, from really far off, that should work. And that would help a lot, because it would let him stalk from afar and come up with some ideas to get out of tier 1 faster. Some other people think that tier 1 should only be 2 or 3 seconds so that he can get out really quickly. I like that idea too. A really good one is that a successful hit puts you in tier 2, or even better, puts you at 99 tier 1, so that you can quickly choose to go to tier 2 if you actually want to. I think this is super good. Right now, the problem in tier 1 is that if you creep up to a survivor and you grab them, you're probably going to fail. And if you grab them unsuccessfully, you put them in the hook, and now you're in tier 1 still without any stock. So the problem is that if you grab them, you're going to fail. If you're successful, you're in tier 1 still, which sucks. And if you hit them, they're going to use the speed boost. They're going to go very far away and behind cover. And either they're far, which means your stalking is very slow, or they're behind cover, which means you cannot stalk them at all. So tier 1, it's a lose-lose situation. Even if you come really close to a survivor, the best thing you can do is just stare at them. So if you could hit them and have your 99 tier 1 immediately pop, that would be awesome. It would reward you for sneaking up on survivors and make the early game of Michael a bit like the early game of Ghostface. Scary, rewarding, and giving you a chance to do something good, you know? So that would be great for his early game. We've also agreed that tier 3 triggering could be a on-command thing, a button that you press. It could be so that if you 99 to maximum, you get stuck at 99 and then you need to press it again to do it on command. Or maybe you can press the active ability button or the left control or something to trigger it rather than 99, because it's a little bit outdated. That would be a nice little quality of life change for Michael. And we also feel like his lunge and his slightly faster vault in tier 3, as nice as they are, they don't compare to the stuff that other killers have. We have killers that can shoot through tiny gaps, killers that can teleport through walls, killers that can, you know, do all kinds of crazy things, insta-break pallets. I think if Myers had a slightly slightly sped up action speed in breaking pallets or breaking things in general, and maybe some other things as well, that would make him a bit more threatening in tier 3. That's all for Myers. Trapper, honestly, some really simple changes will help him a lot. I think 2 traps by default is almost non-negotiable. If he had 2 traps by default, he wouldn't need to do this awkward thing where you spawn, you see a trap, but you cannot pick it up, so you need to put a trap on the ground first that's in a subpar place just to pick that one up. 2 trap capacity would help immensely. And it would also make his add-ons make a lot more sense. You wouldn't constantly need to bring a bag. You would actually be able to mix it up with other things as well. To keep the add-ons untouched and, relatively unchanged, you could make it so that he has a 2 trap capacity by default, but if you bring the brown back, he has 2 traps starting at the start. That would be a great compromise. Very, very simple change. That would really, really help. We also believe, and by we, I say me, I personally really believe that the rescue times and the escape times are all over the place. The rescuing time is less than 3 seconds, basically. And that's how long it takes for the trapper to put the trap down in the first place. You cannot have 2 survivors undo the action of 1 killer while 2 other survivors are doing actions. That's ludicrous. Rescue time, it should be a little bit longer. Maybe something in the neighborhood of 4 seconds. Where if the killer is nearby, he can do something. And if the killer is far away, the rescue will probably happen. It could be a bit less, but definitely more than 1.7 seconds, which is what's around. Lefty in the chat will agree, surely. And the escape time is also a bit all over the place. It takes 1.8 seconds or so to escape by default, and you have a 25% chance, again, by default to escape. And this can result in crazy things. You can step on a trap and escape, and you were out of the injured, so the trap doesn't even injure you any further, and then you're fine. You're completely fine. And that took you 3 seconds. Or you could be there literally for a minute. It's rare, but if you're unlucky, you could be on a trap for ages. For a very, very long time. It would be very nice if this RNG was normalized. If there was some kind of system that made it so that at most, you'll be on a trap maybe 8 seconds. And at least you'll be there for 4 to 5 seconds. So that the killer has a general idea of what he can and cannot do. The biggest problem with Trapper right now is that if you're moderately, and by moderately I mean a little bit far away from your traps, if someone steps on one, you look at it and you don't know what to do. Should I go there? If there's no one nearby, yes. go there, and if he stays in the trap a while, it's the great idea. You will win the game doing that. But if there's another survivor that rescues immediately, not a good idea. They'll rescue and get the hell out. And if the survivor escapes on their first attempt, it's a bad idea. He's gonna rescue himself, then hard to a pallet, drop it, and he's fine. You wasted your time. You don't know what to do. Having some bare minimum of time would actually make your only power, that's the trapper, your only power a bit more reliable and less RNG dependent. On top of that, I think it's a good compromise that if a survivor gets out by himself or herself out of a trap, that they experience a deep wound effect. That means that survivor, if he's being chased now, he's fine. If he's not being chased now, he needs to sit down and mend for 12 seconds, which I think is default, to make up for the mistake of stepping on a trap. If he gets rescued by someone else, no deep wound, encourages survivors to actually help each other. It would also be amazing if the trap logic for their spawns was a bit tweaked. Right now, you can have a big map. Let me draw it right here. A big map with a hill on the side, like, say, this could be Ormond right here. This is Ormond, big building. This is Shag. Oh, it looks like it's sad and hopeless. Yeah, that's Ormond, all right. And you get this hill that you have to go through here, and the trap is here. You have to go so far to get that one trap. If traps were centralized, if they were more likely to spawn in the center parts of the map that you inevitably go through more quickly and that are easier to get to and from, that would help the trapper a lot. Any increase and improvement in this area would be amazing for a trapper. And I think with that, trapper and his add-ons would be fine. We also talked about Clown. He's one of the more challenging killers to talk about, because if you just buff his numbers, he becomes overpowering. Some things that would be nice though. He has an unnecessary vault noise. Some killers, they do noise when they vault, but it's very subtle. Trapper, for example, when he vaults, he does this rubbery sound. But survivors, unless they're paying a lot of attention, cannot hear it. The Clown, however, is a bit of an exception. When he vaults a window, he goes... It's unnecessary. It's uncalled for. It just makes the killer that out of these struggles, it doesn't do so well, just have one more downside. It should be removed. It also would really help to... Like, this very awkward thing happens as a Clown, where you use your bottles very effectively. You get a hit with one bottle, then you use another bottle beautifully. You get another hit, now he's down. You put him on the hook. You see people on barbecue. And now, even though you've only used 2 bottles and you'd like to just get down to business, you have to reload very slowly after each unhook. The killer has no mobility. He doesn't have any ability to cover the map quickly. And this slowdown for using your power right is a bit unnecessary and doesn't feel very good. It would be great if after every hook, you got a full reload of all of your bottles. This would encourage you to not waste your bottles, not have to reload too much, but actually get a bang for your buck every time you use them right. We've also talked about whether or not it would be a good idea. If he has 2 bottles, maybe the reload should be a bit shorter. And if he has 5, if he has lost all 5 and he has none, maybe the reload could be a bit longer. There are some implications to this, so I don't know how this system could work, but it would be nice if you could reload one by one, or if there was some system that made reloads a bit less of a chore. Because right now, you know, you have used 1 bottle, you want to reload, but it takes so long. And you're slowing yourself down so much, it's a bit of a tough call. That would be a nice addition as well. These are relatively simple changes. We made a point to make changes that don't need new graphics, new animations, new anything, really, for the most part. Other than perhaps the items having unique skins. That could be an exception. But I honestly think this could be done. If not all of it, some of it, relatively quickly. Obviously, the map changes, those are difficult. Those require a lot of coordination between art, making the assets, and map creators. I think we understand that. But this is generally... Some of these changes are very, very simple. Like literally changing the amount of traps on Trapper. And I think they would help the game, sincerely. Now, if there's other changes that you guys think we're missing, it's time to tell me in the chat. And if you're watching this on YouTube, to tell me in the comments. But yeah, that's the patch that we came up with today.